My hero is Joseph.
My hero name is Gideon.
David.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
My heroes are Abraham.
Daniel.
By faith, Noah builded the ark on land to save mankind.
By faith, Joseph trusted in God's plan, and no matter what, he listens to what God told him to do.
By faith, Gideon led the Israelite army and beat the Palestinians and led the Israelite army for 40 more years.
By faith, David killed a bear and beat the Goliath.
By faith, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood in front of everybody and proved their love for the Lord.
With faith, Abraham was able to get promises from God. He was able to be assured that his bloodline would be as the stars in the sky.
By faith, Daniel walked with God and conquered kingdoms.
Gideon is my hero for many reasons. And my reason is, one time Gideon was threshing until an angel appeared, and when Gideon noticed that it was an angel, he made an offering. It had young goat meat, unleavened bread, and lastly, broth. And God said, take the meat and unleavened bread, place them on this rock, and pour out the broth. So Gideon did his offering and got accepted. Then God said, don't be afraid if you die, I'll be with you. Gideon tested God to make sure that God really chose him for the Israelite army. So he said, Lord, please make the fleece be filled with dough and the ground be dry. The next day he came, and it was true. The fleece was wet with dough and the floor was dry. So Gideon tested one more time, and he said, God, please let me try one more time, and please protect me. And he said, Lord, please let the fleece be dry and the floor be dough with wet. So then it was true. And then Gideon knew to lead the Israelite army. He won with faith. And the three things that he used was a clay pot, a trumpet, and torch of fire. And he also only had 300 men, and he beat an army of 100,000.
Joseph's faith really didn't fail. He just had a strong faith and, well, he just trusted in God. And he did that pretty much no matter what. This is the map of Canaan. There's a lot of cities, and the land of Canaan is just not one land, I'm pretty sure. It's a couple of lands altogether, including the land of Hamath, the land of Gilead, the land of Edom. Examples of Joseph's faith. By refusing Joseph's internment, Joseph testified against the false Osirian theology and the priests of Egypt. And he really didn't fail to follow God, and he had a really strong faith. I mean, even though his brothers sold him 10 years later, he wasn't all angry about them just because his own brothers sold him, and he knew that he heard them planning that, well, his brothers were going to tell that to his father that he was dead, which was a lie, but I mean, 10 years later, he wasn't mad about that. So really strong faith there. Joseph had a great faith in his brothers. He believed in a God who would bring good from even the most terrible circumstances. A little while later, as Joseph neared death, he said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land into the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Conclusion and summary of Joseph's faith. Joseph's story shows us what it looks like to trust in God's overarching plan. The overall lesson, just follow God no matter what. Every single time, no matter what, and no matter anything that happens, when you follow God's plan, it's always going to end in a right way.
David was a shepherd, and his brother thought he was just a normal shepherd. He was weak. He couldn't do anything good. But David, like a lion came, and then one of his sheeps were loose, and then he grabbed the sheep and then killed the lion, and then the same thing happened but with a bear. But David had heard about the Goliath, and he told the king he wanted to fight the Goliath, and the other soldiers thought he couldn't. But then when the other people were trying to fight the Goliath, everyone was scared. But David had faith in God that he could beat Goliath, and he beat Goliath.
He built an ark for 100 years on the land, and people kept saying that he was crazy. But he said, no, I'm building an ark and there's actually going to be a flood. But people kept saying he was crazy. So he kept warning them, but they didn't listen. So at the end, once the flood came, they were dead and he was still on the boat alive. Because he listened to God, and he respected that if he listened to God, he'll save mankind and nothing will get ruined. If you listen to God, you're gonna help the mankind. You're gonna help what's gonna happen in the future. Like Noah decided that God gave Noah a gift, so he's gonna keep that gift safe because God gave him a gift, so he's giving God a gift back because God gave him a gift.
Imagine, your kingdom just got conquered by the strongest nation in the world at the time, Babylon. You and some of the other wise men of your kingdom got taken to the Babylonian palace where you're wise men. There you're offered some of the best foods in the whole world. But there's one problem. Long ago, your God told you that the food that they were offering is unclean and you should never eat it. Now, most people would say, oh, that was a long time ago, or oh, we sinned, God doesn't care anymore. But Daniel and his friends knew that God still cared about them, and God would keep his promise, and he would come and rescue them after the 70 years like he promised. And he had faith that God, even if he was eating vegetables, would still be just as strong as all the other men. One night, the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, had a dream that he could just not understand. So he called all the wise men of the whole palace, but none of them could understand it, mainly because he refused to tell them the dream. But Daniel just asked for time so he could pray and ask God for the answer. And in that time, instead of running away, he actually did pray because he had faith that through his prayer, God would tell him the answer and the dream, and God did. After Babylon fell, Daniel was sent to Persia, where some wicked men tricked the king into throwing Daniel into a lion's den. Most people would have said, my time has come, these are lions, I can't stop them. But Daniel had faith that God would come and save him, and he prayed. And God heard his prayers and saw his face and sent his own angel down to shut the jaws of the lions. Daniel's faith was so great that God told him some of his greatest secrets, like when his son would be born or what would be the next nations to come. Now I have a question for you. When we think of heroes of faith, we think of Abraham or Moses. But did God tell Abraham or Moses when the world would end? No, because Daniel's faith and humility was the greatest in the whole Bible.
Now, I think everybody knows Abraham because he might just be the stereotype of faith. The first thing that pops in people's minds when they hear the word faith, when they think of following God, Abraham comes to mind. And that's for a reason, because Abraham is special. Every story has a beginning, and it all starts where Abraham is rich and comfortable. And God tells him to go, to leave his comfort, to leave all his possessions and belongings, and to listen to him. Now, most people would question, ask why, because they want to know what's happening. And even other heroes of faith, other people who you're being told are so special, other people who are praised, other people who are known for their faith, they ask God, why? Why? Why have you forsaken me? But Abraham was blindly faithful. God said this and he did it. And Abraham left all his possessions, all his riches, to live in a tent, to live in conditions that can't be compared to what he lived with earlier. And through his faith, he obtained favor with God. And God had promised him a son. And even though he was old, he still believed. He still believed in God's promise for him. After year and year and year and year and year, time after time, as he looked down and saw his beard grow whiter, his faith became brighter. he was able to, after 25 years of waiting, imagine waiting a day, a month, a full year. He waited 25 years. And after all of that waiting, he had given him a son. And after that, God had told him to sacrifice his only son Isaac that he had been waiting for 25 years. So he got up the next morning and was willing to kill his son, his promise, because he had faith that whatever God did, it would be best, that his plan was what mattered the most. And that's why Abraham is not just a hero of faith, but a superhero of faith.
Daniel had 3 friends, and their names were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. One day they found out that the king of Babylon was going to make them bow to a statue and treat it like God. And they immediately knew they were not going to do that. But they had to do it on their own because Daniel had to do something for the king and couldn't be there. So the day the king told everybody to bow to the statue, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stayed standing. And the king decided to punish them by throwing them into the furnace that he used to melt all the precious metals. But since they had such great faith in God, God quenched the violence of the fire. But not only did the king see the 3 boys in the fire not injured or killed, but he also saw a 4th person. But who was it? It was none other than the Lord Jesus Christ. I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego showed great faith in God because when everyone else bowed to a statue, they stayed standing. When everyone else turned away from God, they stayed with God, even if it costed them their life.
I learned from Joseph that always trust in God's plan and everything will end well.
What I learned from Gideon is that he was very faithful and he always trusted in God.
I learned from David, he was very faithful, and it doesn't matter what size you are to do a big challenge.
I learned from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to stay strong in my faith with God.
I learned from Noah that if you trust in God, you'll have a bright future.
I learned from Abraham to trust God.
From Daniel, I learned that any problem can be learned from faith and prayer.
Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I am the living one.